When you open Excel and there's no files open, it'll start with the template view. And you can see all the various templates that I have here. This first template is the blank template. That's probably one of the templates you'll use most. And then you can see there's a whole category of templates all throughout on this page. And if you're interested in particular types of templates, for example, invoicing, you can go up to the top right here and click Invoice, and that's going to narrow it down to invoicing templates. And then on the right over here, you can see that there are categories within invoicing that you can choose from. So if I want something for taxing, there's 12 of those, and I can click here, and it's going to show me those kinds of invoices. And if I'm interested in using that invoice, I can just click and it's going to load that invoice. It may need to download it, and that'll take just a little bit of time, and then it'll open up. And if I want to go back, I can just click Home, and that's going to bring me back to all of my templates. And this window here is divided into mostly two sections. So there's all of the templates on the right here that take up most of the view, and on the left there's this green strip, and this is where I can manipulate files. Here is new. This is just new file, which we're on now. And then there's Open, and if I click Open, I can go to some locations here that I might want to use. So there's the recent ones. These are all the recent documents that I've opened, and this list will grow as I create more documents and save them. There's OneDrive, which is basically saving to the cloud. Then there's My Computer, so I can choose locations, and here's some recent locations. I can click Browse. This will just let me go to different areas on my computer, different folders, different drives, maybe network drives, and I can open files from those locations. Then there's Add Location. These are other cloud services that you might want to use. Then if I had a file open, these would light up over here, and we'll look at those in just a little bit. Then there's Account. So this is your Office Online account, and then Options. So these options are configuring Excel. And then starting off with the first option here, General, most of this you're probably just going to leave as it is. Usually that works fine. And if you want, though, one of the things that people often change are their fonts. So you can see here, if you want to make them bigger, you can click here and that'll change your fonts, make them bigger. Then there's the formulas, and again, most of this is going to be the same. I'm going to go to Save, and here's where you can find the default location, for example, that you might want to save to. So anytime I save a document, it's just going to automatically go right there. And a lot of this you'll also probably want to leave as it is. Then there's language here. So if you're in the United States, for example, or mostly English-speaking country, this is probably going to be the same, and you won't need to worry about that. But there are other languages you can choose from right here, and then you would click Add to add that. Then there's Advanced, and these are settings that you'll probably not have to worry about, but if you're in a non-English speaking country, you might want to come through here and then figure out what you'll want to use. For example, the thousands separator, decimal separator. So you might want to change some of these, and you can uncheck this box here so that it's not using the system separators, and you can go in and change to whatever you want. But if you're using non-English language, your system language should be able to automatically put the correct values here. I'm using English right now, so it's using a period for decimal separation and a comma for thousands. But if I wanted to override English and I wanted to use something else, so maybe for the decimal I'd want to use a comma, then I would uncheck this system separators and type in the ones that I want to use. Then there's Customize the Ribbon, so if you want to see different things, and we'll look at those in a little bit. These are all the different tabs that are displayed at the top. So this is basically the ribbon, and then you can click and see what's inside of those. And you can move things back and forth. So if I want to put in, for example, format cells, I want to put it under here, I can click add and move over here, and then I can move that up and down. So if I highlight this and click these arrows, it's going to move it up and down, and that'll be reflected inside of the ribbon. And here's the quick access toolbar, which is the one that is up here in the top left corner. Then the add-ins, this is an area that you're not really going to need to manipulate from here, at least configuration wise. You'll use the add-ins to add more things, but there's other ways to get to it as well. And that's probably all you'll need to know about the Excel options. So if we go back to File, and on this green strip over here, I'm going to click this arrow, which is then going to go right into Excel. And there's not a document open right now, so probably it would do me well to just new and go with blank. So if I click blank, we're going to go ahead and open a blank document. And now I am in my document. And up here is the ribbon. So I've got home, which is probably the most common one, and then there's insert. Here's where you can get to charts, and you can do filtering as well. Well, these filters right here are timeline and slicer, so these are not the most common filters. So for example, if you're doing sorting, then there's other ways to get at that, which we'll look at. There's the equations over here, symbols. So if you're looking for currency symbols, math symbols, that's where you would find them. That's in insert. There's page layout. So if I click my spreadsheet, if I click a cell in here, it's going to highlight these. And these have to do with just manipulating the look of the page, the structure of the page. Formulas are all about formulas. If you click on math and trig, you'll get to some of these formulas. So as you're typing formulas and you're trying to look for something, this is where you could come to try and find out what would I use for some particular kind of thing. And if you hover over these for a little bit, they're going to give you a hint, and then you can click tell me more, and it'll go into that area. There's the data tab. Here's where you would find the sorting I mentioned earlier, and there's conditional formatting as well. So here's the filter, and you can do sort and filter right here. And then there's different kinds of grouping. Then we'll go to review. This right here, probably you're not going to use too much, but you can put comments if you want into your cell. View. You can do things with printing. You can freeze header rows in this one. You can do zooms, and then switching between windows. Fred is actually an add-in. We don't need to look at that one right now. That's from the Federal Reserve. So now if we look at the page itself, we have a sheet. So this is the first sheet. And for Excel, the overall document is called a book. So the book has sheets in it, or spreadsheets. And if I click this plus down here, I'll get a new sheet. So our book has 2 sheets or 2 pages in it at this point, and I can click more. And so they're just going to keep going and going as I click the plus icon. Each sheet is used for a different context, you could say. So on this sheet, you can do some kind of formula, and you can maybe do color coding and things like that. And here on this sheet, you might do something else. And you can link sheets. You can have formulas in this sheet 1, reference things in sheet 2. So it's a way to break up and segment your data, the sheets are. And now if I go to my icon up here to save, so we come back to this window that we looked at earlier, and I can click to save to my desktop or my documents, or I can click browse. I can from here as well print, share. I can export this, and there are a few export options. So here's where you would do a PDF export. Then you click create. You can change the file type you're saving as, which right here you probably don't want to do. If you just want to get out of this document and not really worry about saving, you can click close and tell it not to save. So if I go back to save, I'm just going to put this on my desktop, and now it's going to ask me for a name. I can tell it whatever I want. So if I just do test 1, and click Save. So this document is now saved, and it's going to appear in my recently used documents. So if I go to Open, you can see here's Test 1. I can click Test 1 at any time, and it's going to open Test 1. And that's a quick introduction to opening files, saving files, and also the ribbon in Excel. One of the most common things to do is to create a formula. So we're going to see how to do that, and we're going to see how to use a few of the functions within a formula. So right now, if I'm going to create some data, so let's say I have 10, 20, 10, and I've got 30. And I want to add all of this up. So I'm going to start off with a formula to do that, and it's going to sum everything. So I start off with the equal sign. And the equal sign is showing right here in my cell. It's also showing up here in this window. I can type it either place. I'm just going to work in the cell, and that's probably what you'll do most of the time. So if I say sum, you can see here it's giving me a hint of different things. I just want the regular sum, which you can see in the hint. It says adds all the numbers in a range of cells. A range is just a continuous segment of cells. So this continuous segment of cells is going to be cells 1 through 4. So I'll start with the parentheses to open this function. So here I'm building a formula, and I'm opening this function called sum. I'm using this function called sum. And what I can do now, there's two ways to get this range. I can drag. You can see here I've got it highlighted, and the dots around this highlighter kind of marching, I guess you could say, are moving, and it's saying A1 colon A4. This colon signifies a range. It's saying we're going from A1 to A4. At this point, I'm done basically with this function. I can add a closed parentheses, or I can just tab out. I'll go ahead and just add the closed parentheses, and now I'll tab out, and here's my formula. Now, there's another way I can do this if I just want some of the numbers in here. And I'm going to start over with my formula, which just means I can click the equal sign, and it will overwrite whatever was in there. And I'll say I want to add row 1 and row 4, and that's all. So I'll click row 1, and then I'll do a plus row 4. So you can see this is not a range. These are not continuous cells. We're actually just picking out the different cells that we want. There's no parentheses because I'm not using any particular function. I built this as a simple addition formula, and now I'll tab out. And I've got my sum of those two cells. Now I might want to put a border underneath this, and to do that, click on your Home tab, then click right here in the font box, and there's this little box here. It's actually a border box, and it's got like a cross going through it, and it's an outline. Click that. You will want a bottom border. So if we look here, we've got bottom border. I've got this cell highlighted over here. This cell is called A4, which means at the top I've got the letter A, and right here I've got the number 4. So this is cell A4. And then if I click bottom border, it's going to apply a bottom border to cell A4. So I'll click that, and I'll tab out. You can see now we've got a bottom border. Now let's say that we want to do a different kind of addition. We want to actually do cells 2 and 3. And I'm going to do it over here because you don't need to do it next to these cells. You can do it wherever you would like to. So I'll start off with an equal again. And I'm going to, I could click it like we did earlier, and I would highlight cell 2 and I'd highlight cell 3, but instead I'm going to say I want cell A2. So just as we referenced this cell when we were adding the border and we called it A4 and we gave it a border, I'm just referencing A2, and then I'm going to say plus, I want A3. And I can type in A3 and it's going to highlight that right there so I'll know which one I'm working with, or I can click it, either way. And if I tab out, I get my summation. And maybe if I want, I can make this bold, so I can go up here and click. In the font, again, I'm on the Home tab, the most commonly used, and I'll just click bold. But you might have looked at that and said, well, why didn't we do a sum? We could have, because this is continuous. We could work with that range. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and redo this, and I'll say sum, and I'll say A2 to A3. But just because it's two cells, it's a little bit more work to type in all of this than just to do A2 plus A3. So it just depends on what you're doing there, but in this case it was quicker just to do the plus earlier. Now you can go through and do all of these, the basic kinds of math, and so for example, if I want to rework this one, I can click this cell and start reworking it from up here, or if I tab out of this and click back into it, I can double click this cell and then just move my cursor and hit minus, and that's going to do a subtraction. And then over here, if I want to do a division, if I want to divide cell 4 by cell 3, I can do this, divide this. Tab out, and there's it. There's my division. Or if I double click into here, I can rework this and do a multiplication. And there we go. Now I can go back to the formulas tab, or up to the formulas tab, and I've got all these different formulas I can work with. Here you can see we've got sum, averages, min, max. So if I want to use any of those, let's say I want the average of all of these cells, I'll click equal, I'll click average, well I'll click auto sum, and then I'll select average. Let's see. Okay. And now it's looking at what it thinks we might want to use as an average, which is really not what we want. So if I just click out of this, I'm going to redo that. We're going to try this again. The issue is just the order in which we're applying things. So if I click into this cell and hit delete, I'll clear it out. Notice the cursor is blinking in the cell. I don't want that, so I'm just going to click into this cell over here. Then I'll click back to C3. C3 is highlighted. Then I'll click auto sum, average. Okay, and here's where we were before in the cells that are highlighted. I'll click on the first cell I want, I'll drag down to get this full range. Now you can see we have the cells that we want to calculate against, and I'll tab out. And there's the proper value. Now, if I would have done this and hit enter and tried to do average, it wouldn't have worked right. You can see here nothing's really happening. Or if I clear this and I just have my cursor in here and then I go back and I do average, again, nothing's happening. What you need is just have the cell highlighted without the cursor in it. You do that by not double clicking into it. So if I go back and I hit average, then it's trying to determine something to average, and all we have to do is come around behind it, select the cells we want, and tab out, and that will give us our average. Now we're going to look at Excel formulas and how to use them. So I'm going to start off with a few numbers here. So I have 1 and 3, and I'm actually going to go ahead and put in something like a header column, and this is going to be for totals. Now you can start a formula off by hitting the equal sign, and then I want to add these, so I can do two things. I can do sum, and I'll choose this number, comma, and that number. I'll close my parenthesis and tab out, so I get the 4 here. If I delete that, I can also do equals, again starting a formula. I can do 1 plus 3 and tab out. Now if I have something like this where it's a lot more and I want to get the total of all of these, I can do this, and instead of clicking each one and doing something like this, which is useful just for maybe 2, I don't want to do it with the big long string of numbers. So instead, that's where sum comes in useful, and you can just highlight all of these and you get the sum of those. And there's a few other scenarios that might be more complex, and for those you can click the formulas tab and the formulas will be up here. And so for example, I can click on math and trigonometry, and here's a lot of the useful formulas. And for example, let's say I've got 1, 2, got -4 and -3. So let's sum these, and I'll just highlight those and tab out. So I get this error here telling me I've got a circular reference, and basically that means I've highlighted all the cells I want to sum, and then I went into the formula cell, which I'm trying to sum the formula, and that's not really going to work. So I'll just double click into here to show my formula, and I'll change this to a 4, and that'll fix that issue, and now I got my sum. And earlier I showed my formula. I double clicked into here to show the formula. You can do a single click into your cell, and you can also edit up here at the top if you want to do that. Now let's say I want to just show the absolute value here of this sum. I can go and look and see what some of the formulas are, and as I go through these they show hints, and right here I've got absolute value. This is the one I'd want to use. Returns the absolute value of a number. But all these others will show hints as well so that you can see what exactly they are. So I know ABS is what I want, and it just takes one parameter. It takes the number that I'm going to look at the absolute value on. So I see my formula up here at the top. I'll just go ahead and click right before sum, and I'm going to put that into parentheses because this is the single number that I want the absolute value for. I'll tab out, and now I've got the absolute value of 4. So that is a simple scenario, and for this sum here there's also the auto sum is right there. You can just click that and highlight these and then click auto sum, and it's going to sum the value right there. Let's look at another kind of example. So I'm going to go ahead and clear out these cells. Let's say I've got first, well actually let's do something a little different. I'm going to go with email, and then let's say I've got a few emails here. I've got Hotmail. Let's see, I've got Microsoft, and let's do another Gmail, test3@gmail. I'm going to go ahead and double click on here to provide the width that we can see everything, and let's say I want to find just Gmail emails. So any email that has a Gmail value, I'm going to go ahead and click equals to start a formula. I will do find. Now find is saying what text value are you looking for, and I am looking for Gmail. I'm actually going to put this in quotes because it is text. Within what text? This is going to be what I'm looking for. I'm looking in this cell for the text value, and I'll close it off. And you can see I get a 6. This is the position that Gmail starts. So it's starting, the G is the 6th character in this string, and if I drag these on down I get reference errors right here for the ones that don't have it, and then for the ones that do I get a number, so that way I can see what's going on with these. And then I can highlight these and go to my conditional formatting, highlight cells greater than 0, and it's just going to highlight the ones with values. This way I can quickly see which ones have the value I'm looking for. Let's look at another scenario. Let's say I've got name, and in name I've got John Doe, I've got Steve Jackson, and I've got Mike Williams. And I'll go ahead and double click, and that way we can see everything. I want to split these so that I've got first name and last name. Let's look at how that might work. So I'm going to say here another equals, and I'm going to do a left. Actually, before I do that, I want to create some metadata for length, and then I'm going to just do len on this. You can see here I just tabbed right out. I didn't even worry about this closing parentheses. Excel will go ahead and fill that in automatically. And I'll drag this down so I have length. I'm going to need these numbers in my formula, so that's why I'm adding them here. And then I'm going to do space. So here I did length, and then I'm going to do equals find what text am I wanting. I'm wanting to find a space. I'm wanting to find a space within text, this text. And I'll just tab out again. Excel gave me that parentheses. And I'll just call this space position. So that's the position of my space. And I'll drag that down. Alright. I'm going to go ahead and highlight these in gray since it's metadata, it's not some of the main data. Let me see, this is fine so that it's de-emphasized. Now we're going to go ahead and start splitting these. I'll do equals left. Now it's saying what text. I want to work on this text and number of characters. I want to go up to the space. So actually I want to go right before the space. So the space is 5. My n is actually 4, position 4. So I'll say this minus 1. So that's the space minus 1 gives me my n, and I get John. And if I drag that down, I get the first name of all my entries here. Now let's work on last name. So you might guess what this is going to be. We're going to do right. And we're also going to do text again. So this is the text that we want. And what are the number of characters? Well, the number of characters are our length. And we don't type in the 8 there. We actually click on the cell. So this is, I can't click because my formula is actually stretching out into the cell that I want. So this is cell G and row 2. So I'll just click G2. And then I want to subtract the space position, which is right here, this 5, and I'll tab out. And you can see I get dough. Now I'm going to click the bottom here and just drag these down, and I've got all of my last names, so everything is split now. And let's say that I want these to be capitalized because you can see they came in as not capitalized. So these may have been imported, and they were imported like this and they weren't capitalized. So what if I want to capitalize this? There's another function I can use called proper, and I'm going to put a parentheses around our left function so that everything inside of there is going to be manipulated by this proper function. I'll tab out. You can see here it wants us to add our parentheses. So it's this time it's because the formula is getting a little more complex. Do you want to accept the correction? You can see it's got the ending parenthesis over here. I'll say yes. And it added John. It capitalized the J on John. And if I drag that down, all the others are the same way. And then you can go into the last, which we'll go ahead and do that real quick, proper. I'll go ahead and add this closing parentheses because we know it's going to give us an error if I don't, because our formula is getting a little more complex here. And then I'll drag down, whoops, cancel. Need my crosshair, drag down, and those are all capitalized as well. And if we go back to formulas, so we have all of this up here, this information for different kinds of formulas. We'll go into recently used. You can see our recently used formulas are in there, which is really useful. So just a few different things you can do for manipulating text with formulas, and also to make use of the hints that Excel provides to you in formulas, and you get to know a lot of these formulas better with those hints. Now we're going to look at a very useful function called concatenate, and let's see how this might be used. So if I have, alright, I have city here, and then I've got state, and I'll just bold these. So let's say we have Dallas, and over here TX, and we have New York, and over here we have NY, and we have, let's say, Seattle, and then we have WA. And in this cell, let's say I want this to look like Dallas, Texas. What I can do is start a formula, so I'll do equal, I'll say concatenate, and I'll go ahead and tab out. And this is asking which text values I want to concatenate. So I'm going to click Dallas, I'll do a comma. What's the next text value that I want? Well, it's TX, it's Texas. But before I do that, I actually want to put a comma between them. So I'm just going to add my own value for a comma, and then I want a space after the comma. So I'll add a space, and then I'll just do a quote to close that string, and then I'll do another comma. So it's asking me, okay, well, do you have any more? Because I added a comma, so it thinks there's more. And there is. There's this TX, there's the state. And that's it. I'm done. Now if I did another comma, you could see I could keep going for however long I want. I could concatenate all kinds of strings here, but I'm going to stop right there and tab out. And Excel adds my closing parenthesis for me. I don't need to worry about that. You can see I've got this nice format, and I can drag down, and that's going to then fill in the rest of them. And if I double click on in between, I get this up and down line with the two arrows pointing left and right, and on double click it spreads it out. So now I can see all of my text. So this might be a column, header, city, state, and then I can just bold that. And I've got a format that I like here. So that's the concatenate function, which is very useful. You can just keep adding strings into this, as many as you want. And if these were to change, so I've got Houston, and then over here I've got Dallas, and if I tab out, you can see it updates. So they'll update as you update. And if I wanted to, instead of this comma, just do, for whatever reason, maybe a hyphen. If I do that, I've got this hyphen, then I can just drag down, and it's going to update all of those as well. And that is the concatenate function. We're going to look at a shortcut for a fairly common computation. And I've got two scenarios here, and we're going to go through each one. What I want to do here is figure out the weighted score for a test. So I have 3 tests. I've got a score and I've got the weight, and what I want is this times this will equal this over here, and then I'll get some kind of total. Now there's a common way to do this, which would be this times this equals, then you drag down, you get that, then you sum it. So you can see there's an intermediary step where we're creating this right here, and then we're creating what we actually want. So this is what we're after, but this right here is something that we've got to do before we can get there. And there's a quicker way to do it, which I'm going to show you how now, whenever you have this particular kind of setup. So if all you want is that total, you can use something called sum product. And what we have here is 2 summations. We've got this column here, and we want the product, which is just multiply those 2 columns. Now sum product takes arrays, and just take as many arrays as you want. What we have are actually arrays. So if I highlight this right here, and then I do comma, and then I highlight this one, that's 2 arrays, and all I do to separate them is put the comma. And if I had more, I could just keep going. So I'm going to go ahead and close this and tab out. We get the same number right there. So that's sum product. Very easy to do, very quick to do this kind of computation. And if we have more of these, let's try this right here. We have products, we've got a cost of each product, we have units, and we want to know the total value of our inventory. So down here, actually I'm going to put it right here, I can do sum product, and I'll do my first array, which is the cost, comma, I'll do my second array, and tab out. And then we have our total value of inventory. So that's sum product, very easy to use, extremely efficient. We're going to look at how to figure out the number of days or even the number of years from a certain date. So let's say we've got the date 1/20/1980, and I'm just going to add a few more here. So we've got, let's see, 6/15/1960, 4/21/1958. Just arbitrary dates. And now I want to know how many days or between today and this date, 1/20/1980. So I'm going to do equals today minus this date, and that's going to give me this here, which is a date. And I don't want a date, I actually want a number. So what I'll do now is I'm just going to format this column as a number. So I'll say number. I don't need any decimal places. And there's the number of days, 12,560. If I go ahead and drag this down, then that's the number of days to these other dates from today. So let's say I want to know the years between today and this day, 1/20/1980, and these others right here. So since I've already calculated the days, what I can do is equals this divided by 365, and that's the number of years. Now if I want to go ahead and manipulate these so that the years will show up right here, what I can do in this case is surround the entire formula in parentheses, and then I'll do divided by 365 and tab out. And then I can just drag this down, and that gives me the number of years. So this right here is completely different. This is not years anymore. So I can just delete that, and we have our values that we were after right there. We're going to see how to use a VLOOKUP, which is short for vertical lookup. And what that means is the vertical part, we're just going from top to bottom or bottom to top. There's also an H lookup, which would then mean you're going horizontal or side to side. VLOOKUP allows us to type in a value or associate some value to values in a table. So for this example, this is our table, or our table of values. Our entire table actually would be this. We have some header columns. But this is our lookup table. So somewhere we're going to have a value or a set of values, and then we want those values to look up something in this table and display the value from this table when there's a match. So in this example, we're going to look up the numeric grade. So right here we're going to have a value. So this is our lookup value. So we're just using one value. We could have a column here that would look up, but we're just going to go with this one value for now. And here is where we're going to output the grade. So this is where our VLOOKUP formula is going to go. And you could start typing out the formula equals VLOOKUP, but we're going to go to formulas, and we're going to go to lookup and reference, and then to VLOOKUP. Our lookup value is going to be our input column. This is going to be where we're typing. Then of course our table array is just the table of values, not the header columns. The column index is which column is containing the values that we're pulling out. So this is going to be B, which is column 2 in our table. So we have column 1, column 2, and column 3. So we're going to say column 2. We'll click OK. And now it starts pulling values out of the table. So I type in 80, we get a different value. But you can see there's some kind of issue with what we're doing here. So if I take our values, I resort them, go to Home, and then I'll go from smallest to largest. Yes, extend selection, so it will extend to all 3 columns, sort. Now our data looks good. So we have 60 is a D, we have 90 is an A, and 80 is a B. Now what if we want to output our pass-fail marks? That's very easy to do. We'll just go to our formula, we'll double click into our formula. We'll change column 2 to column 3. So 80 is a pass, and then 60 is a fail. And then we have 70, which is a pass, but what if we change this to a fail? So you can see there automatically that's going to change to a fail. And then we can have intermediate numbers. So 75 is still going to fail. It's not going to change until we get up to 80. So we can go 79, that's still it. Then if we do 81, we'll pass. Now, let's say we want to restrict this right here to only values that are appearing in our table. So there's an easy way to do that. We can add a drop down that people can select from. Before we do that, I'd like to name the range of cells that we're going to use in our drop-down box. So I'm going to highlight these. I'm going to do in the name box here in grade. I'll click enter, and now this range has a name. So each cell has its individual name, but when I highlight, I get this name here. Just a side note, if you want to ever remove a named range, you can go to formulas and then go to the name manager, and you'll see your named range in here, and you can just delete it out. Now we're going to highlight the cell we want to put our drop down on, and we'll go to data, and then we'll go to data validation and click data validation again. We're going to choose a list, and then we're going to say equals, and we're going to use our range that we've created. And what is our range? Well, we can do the F3 key function 3, and that will show the range. We'll select that, click OK, and then we'll click OK again, and now you can see we've got this drop down, and we can only select these values. So if I you can see our arrow here is kind of hiding our text, and that's only going to appear when you're actually clicked into that cell. But I'm going to go ahead and center these. So go to the Home tab and center. And now when I click, go to 90, get a pass of course. Go to 80, we get a pass. And 60, we don't. So that's one value. Let's say we have several values and we want to look up against all of them. So I'm going to go ahead and add some values over here. And I'll just do a mixture of values so we can see. And right here is where we want to output the pass or fail scenario. So I'm going to go back again to our formulas. I'll go to VLOOKUP. And the lookup value is this. And in the table array, of course, is this one. And I'm going to lock these, so I'm going to do the F4, function 4. That locks the table. And then I'm going to do the third column again. We're going to do the pass-fail column. And I'll click OK. Now I just need to drag these down, so I'll click in the bottom right here and double click, and that fills everything in, and you can see we've applied our VLOOKUP to all the values over here, and that's how you get multiple values out of it. So that's just a quick look at the VLOOKUP or the vertical lookup. Really good for when you want to take some value and find a corresponding value in a table, or a lookup table as they're called. We're going to look at how to manipulate phone numbers. And there's a lot of scenarios that involve manipulation of phone numbers. We're going to start off with one where you might have a listing of numbers that you want to change, say, periods to hyphens. So for example, I might have these numbers here, and it might be something like this. And there might be a few of these, so I'm going to just drag this down to about 5. And we're going to work with this set. What we want to do is replace these periods with hyphens. So I'm going to start off with a formula, and we can use the substitute. And the substitute has a few parameters here, and we'll just go through them. Starting off with text, it's wondering what cell do you want to manipulate. So we're going to start with A1, which you can see is now highlighted. Then it's saying what text do you want to replace. I want to replace periods. And then what text do you want to replace with? I'm going to go with hyphens. And then I can tab out of this, and you can see here we get the change. And I can just drag this down so that it manipulates all the other cells, and there we have our change. If I wanted to do something different, if I wanted this to be maybe nothing, I just wanted the entire number, then I could do this. And that would be the entire number, and I can double click down here in the corner, and that will apply to all of that data there. So let's try something a little bit different. Let's say we have a mixture. So maybe we've got a dot, we've got our prefix here, and then we've got hyphen actually, and it looks like that. So if I create a few of these here, just drag this down, And now I need to replace this mixture. So what I can do is substitute again, and the text is going to be this A7, and the text I want to replace, I want to replace the period, and we're going to go for just a solid number. So I'm not going to replace with anything. We're just going to use the empty string. I need a comma here. So the new text to replace the period is the empty string. Let's just try this. And you can see what's happening there. We're getting that result, and that's fine. Now we need to work on this dash. So what we have here is a result. And out of that result, the only thing left to do is replace that dash. So we're going to take that result and put it in a substitute. And now the first part is, what text do you want to work on? We're going to work on our result that we just had. And then the text that we're replacing, well, there was a hyphen. So we're going to replace that hyphen. And again, we're not going to use anything to replace it with because we want just a number. And that's what happens. And then I can, of course, drag this down and apply it to all my data. So you might find that a little confusing when you look at this formula. We've got substitute inside of substitute. All that happened here was we got a result, which was a number with just a hyphen in it. So the next thing to do is replace it. Replace the hyphen with nothing, which is what we did with our next substitute. And when you start getting formulas in the wrapping like that, it can get confusing to work with and even understand what they're doing. So one way to get around that, I'm going to copy our formula and paste it over here. And I'm going to change this B7 to an A7 so we get the same result. And I'll widen this a little bit. Okay, so what I was saying earlier is we can shed some of these outer formulas. So the way this would have worked, we would have just started with this one, right? And we still have the hyphen. So that can be like a step one. If I add some kind of header column, just insert a row and I'll do step one of our formula, then I'll do step two of our formula. Make a little bit of room here. And step two is going to manipulate the result. So this is a substitute, and we're going to work on this. And in there, we want to remove the hyphen, replace it with nothing. So that makes it a little bit easier to understand. You can see this right here is the same as this. And if I want to divide this a little bit more, I can maybe just put something here like color that solid. Maybe I'll just do a light gray like that, just to show that these are steps and this contains the entire formula in one thing. So let's say we got a different kind of number. We got something like a bubble. We have area code prefix and then our final identifying digits. But they gave us a number that had 1. So it might look like 1206, and it had a period, and it had this, then it had a hyphen. So that doesn't look too friendly. We have a lot going on, and what we want to do, the end result, is to create just regular numbers like we've been doing here. So if we look at this, it's going to be similar to this one. It's going to be similar to this formula where we have a substitute, then we wrap that substitute result in another substitute. But we also have to manipulate this 1. So let's start doing what we know how to do here. We'll go with substitute, and the number we're working with is this one. We're going to replace the period with nothing. So let's see what happens here. So far, so good. Now we're going to work on this result and remove the hyphen. So we're just taking this one at a time. And then I'm going to say the text to replace with is the hyphen and not replace it with anything. So now we should have a solid number, which we do. We have to replace this 1 now. So all of this is a result. And we're going to wrap that result so we can begin manipulating against it. So we could go ahead and just wrap this in another formula and keep working, but you can see we've got 3 functions in here. Well, we will have 3. We've got 2. We've got 2 substitutes. Then we're going to add another. That's 3. So we might just move over here and use our steps. But I'm going to just use a replace and work off of this result. Then we can break it down a little bit more, but I just want to show you. So if I click this, that's the text that I'm working on. And the substitute and the replace are similar in that way. So what I want to replace is this first one. So it's saying, what's the starting number that you're going to be replacing? I'm going to say the first character, which is a 1. How many characters do I want to replace? Just 1, because we're replacing that 1. What character do you want to replace that 1 with? Nothing. I just want to get rid of it. So now if I tab out, you can see here we've got a nice format and our 1 is gone. So if we go back over here and we do the same thing, so it's saying what's your old text? The old text is going to be both substitutes, and then I'll put a comma. Now what's your starting character? It's going to be the 1. It's going to be the first character because we want to remove that 1. How many characters starting at the first character do you want to remove? Just 1 character. And then what text are you replacing with finally? Nothing. Nothing. Don't replace it with anything. And so you can see here we get the result we're looking for, a solid number. And of course this one changed because it's manipulating off of this result, which is different than what it had earlier. So I can delete that, and we have 3 steps now. So I'll break that down here. And we're going to go ahead and start with our first substitute, which begins with the period. So we're working on this number or this cell here, and we're replacing periods with nothing. What does that look like? So far, so good. Give us a little bit more room. And over here, I'm going to do another substitute because now we're replacing this hyphen. So we're working off of this number. That's my text right here, comma. What's the text you want to replace? The hyphen. And what's the new text? Nothing. So far, so good. And then we're going to apply our final part of this build up, which is the replace. And what are we working on? This here. And where are we starting? We're starting the first character. How many characters? 1. And what are we replacing with? Nothing. And there we go. So that's how you can do these stepwise, or just if you're able to do it all in one place. But it will get complicated as you begin growing these things out and wrapping more and more. So that's why it's good to know how to just use these and break them out in steps. So another thing you might want to do is just format cells in your spreadsheet so that when someone types into a cell, it's already kind of pre-formatted for them in a phone number format. So this is not anything we're taking existing data and we're manipulating. We're actually allowing someone to input new data, and as they input, it builds this mask around that data. So this may work good when you have a spreadsheet that you're giving to a client or to coworkers that's nicely formatted in different colors, and there's a field in there where they have to enter a phone number. Now what you can do in that case, and let's see, I'll just say phone number, and below here is where we're going to enter a phone number. And what I want to do is change this to yellow, and they're going to enter a phone number here. I right click on this cell, go to Format Cells, and choose Special, then Phone Number, and click OK. So it looks like nothing's happening here, but I'll go ahead and type in a phone number, and just use one of these above. And then I tab out, and you can see here the mask is applied. So that's very useful for those kinds of fields where you're taking input from someone. What about a scenario where you want to add an area code to phone numbers? So let's say you get some numbers that look something like this. If I drag these down, there's a few of them. Okay, and then over here we want to do a 202 area code. So what I can do in this case is I have 202, I do ampersand, and I do this cell. If I tab out of that, you can see what I get here, this 202, but I actually want the 202 in parentheses, and I want a space after the parentheses. So if I go back in here and I do this, put a parenthesis around it, and then I put a space, we get that look. I'll make this a little bit wider, and then I can just drag this down and apply that to all of my other numbers. We're going to look at some various types of sorting in Excel that can come in very useful. I'm going to start with just doing some numbers. So I'll start with 1, and let's say that I want to have these 10 rows all with a 1. Now I can go in and type these in manually, or I can click in the cell and then click the bottom right corner until I get this crosshair like this. I'll click and drag down to row 10, and it fills in with all 1s. Now that's useful and saves time with typing, but what if I wanted 1, 2, and then I just want to fill this all the way down to 10 right here? So what do I do to click that? Because if I click the 1, we know it's just going to overwrite my 2, it's going to go all the way down to 1. So what I want to do is tell Excel, this is going to be a pattern, and this pattern is 1, 2, and the pattern is add 1 to the number before it. So if I click down here again in the bottom right of the number 2 cell, I drag down, you can see the hints there. It's 8, 9, 10, and it's going to fill it in. So it's going to count off the pattern for me. This also works with dates. So if I do 1950 and then I do 1951 and I click this pattern, so I'm clicking 2 cells so I signify the pattern is add 1 year to the previous year. So I'll go ahead and click and drag down. You can see the hints are showing me 57, 58, 59, and there they are. Now, what if I wanted to do something like 1950, and then I want to do 1952, so that every row is going to add 2. So I'll click the pattern. The pattern is add 2 to the previous year. So I'm going to go ahead and click the bottom right and drag down. You can see the hints, and they're increasing by 2 each time. Now, what if I have something like, I have names, and let's say these names have something like this, and then I have, maybe I've got Steve 2, I've got Jack 3, so kind of leave it at that. And if I click on these names, what is going to be the pattern here? Well, let's drag down and see what happens. So we're going to end on Jack, so I'll just keep dragging. This is good. So you can see what it does. It adds 1 to the previous number, so and keeps the names as constant. So if we look at Andy, Andy is a 1, and we add 1 to Andy, and Andy gets a 2. We add 1 to Andy 2, and Andy gets a 3. And it's doing the same thing with the others. Steve starts off with a 2, and if we add a 1 to a 2, we get a 3, and so on. We get a 4 with this Steve here. So that's how it works with these names. Now I'm going to change this up a little bit and add some different names. So let's go with Bill is 4, and we can use Mike is 5. I'll go ahead and type in something different over here. I'm going to clear these out and do 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And what I want now is I'm going to go ahead and clear these out, in fact, so that I can isolate and show you this particular kind of sorting. Let's say I want to sort, and I want it to sort everything, because what I'm saying here is this 4 belongs to this Bill, this 2 belongs to this Steve, and 3 belongs to Jack. And I've just had the numbers here so that we can see what happens whenever I do this sort. Right now we're going smallest to largest. I want to sort from largest to smallest. That means the number 5, the largest number, is going to be on the top. So if I go over here to the sort and I click, I have largest to smallest, and I'll click it. And here's what Excel says. Do you want to expand the selection? I'm going to tell it expand it. And that means it's going to also grab these names and sort those names with these numbers so everything stays together. So I'll tell it, go ahead and sort. I like that idea. And you can see here, our 5 is on top, and our mic is on top, and then our number 1 is on the bottom, and our corresponding Andy is also on the bottom. Now, what if I just want to sort these numbers? So I'll sort them back, and I'm not going to mess with the names over here. So I'll go back to the sort and filter, and now I'm going to go smallest to largest. I'm going to say no to the expand. I'll just do the current selection and sort. And now I've isolated so that I'm only sorting here. Now this works just as well with names. So what if I want to put these in alphabetical order? So you can see here now we have sort A to Z or Z to A. So it recognizes these are letters and not numbers this time. So we're going to go A to Z. I don't want to expand the selection. I just want the numbers. And there we have it. So now we're alphabetically sorted. And if I adjust our numbers so that they once again correspond to these names, now go back and I want to sort from Z to A. So the highest letter closest to Z will be on top, and the letter closest to A will be on the bottom. That's how we're about to sort this. So I'll go Z to A. I'll tell it, yes, expand the selection and sort. Now, you can see we've got our numbers corresponding to our names and everything is sorted together. So the expand selection, we had it on this side and it's expanded off to the right. And then when we were sorting on this column, it expanded off to the left. So it works in both directions. Now we're going to look at how to remove duplicate values. Let's say I have something like this. And I'm going to add a few of these as duplicates. Okay, now I want to remove all of the duplicates in here. So what I'm going to do is select all of these, and I'll click the Data tab, and then I'll click Remove Duplicates. And yes, column A. And then I'll click OK. And it found 4 duplicates. 6 unique values remain. So you can see here we have 6 rows, so that's the 6 unique values, and 4 out of our 10 were removed, and it's that easy to remove duplicate. Well, let's look at a scenario where we might have 2 columns with duplicates. So I'm going to add a few names. So we'll do an Andy, a David, we'll do a Steve, and a Mike. I'm going to add 2 mics. Down here I'll add a little bit. I'm going to go up to 10 so that we'll have a few more duplicates. And I'll highlight both of these and go up to our remove duplicates. We're going to work on column A and column B, and I'll click OK. 2 duplicates found and removed. 8 unique values remain. So let's look at this. So it took out our duplicates that we had in our numbers column, but it didn't take them out of our name column. So what happened there? We still have 2 mics, and those are definitely duplicates, aren't they? Well, if we go back to what we did earlier whenever the pop-up appeared, so I'll show you here, we were doing column A and column B. These are actually unique. So 2 in David is considered a value, and 5 in Mike is a value, and so is 6 in Mike, and that's unique. 5 Mike is not 6 Mike. So we're not looking at just names in isolation. It's names with the number. And earlier, the numbers down here that were duplicates, they were removed because there was nothing over here, so they were unique. I mean, they were duplicates, and they were not unique. So let's change this a little bit and add another 6 right there. And let's see what happens now if we try to remove duplicates. So we're going to go both columns again. And you can see what happened. 1 duplicate. So you'll notice it removed 2 cells, but it's telling us 1 duplicate was removed because it counted that 6 Mike, that other one, as 1 value. And then this one, 6 Mike, is 1 value. So it removed the other 6 Mike, which was a duplicate. So if we had 3 cells and we highlighted them, it would be the same kind of thing where going across the 3 cells, that's considered 1 value basically. and it's going to look at it that way. So I hope that makes a little more sense. So when we had this right here, this is a value by itself. It's not looking at the 6 in isolation. It's not looking at the mic. This is basically a single value whenever we do this kind of thing and we try to remove dupes. And so that's why it was able to take out the 6 mic. And earlier, if we do this, that's not going to work. That's not going to remove any duplicates at all. So let's look at that. Remove duplicates, column A and column B, nothing to remove. Let's look at conditional formatting. To start us off, I'll create a column of numbers. And actually, I want to do a 3. We'll do 5, 10, and 11, 12, 13. And I'll just go to 10 cells. Alright, now if I highlight these, and I'm on my Home tab here, and go over here and click Conditional Formatting, I want to highlight cells that are greater than 5. That's fine. And you can see it's giving me this feedback without even having applied the change. So if I want to go cells greater than 3, you can see there's the feedback again, and I can change what this is doing. So maybe I do a yellow fill on it, and there are a number of options. So that would just highlight the background. These might be top 10%, and you can see there's the 15 is highlighted. Again, I can change what I want to show here. Maybe I just want the text to be red. And then there's some other very interesting ones. You can see what's happening here. So the 15's got the larger bar. Obviously the one at the top has a smaller bar. So these are gradients right here, and these are just solid bars. Then there's the color schemes, which are also nice. Kind of like a temperature map there, scaling as the numbers change. Then the icon sets are very interesting. And the lights right here, those are very interesting as well. Those are nice. Then there's the ratings down here, like those. All great forms of feedback. You can see the detail changes a little bit depending on what you might want. So that is conditional formatting. But let's say we have text. So if we go with something like this, we have Steve, Mike, Andy, another Steve, and we have James. Alright, now if I want to know, well, let's say this is longer. Something like that. I want to see all the James entries here. If I go to conditional formatting and look at this, this isn't really going to work. This is text, so if I try to do greater than, I can't really do anything with that because it's expecting a number. If I go to the top bottom rules, again we're back to numbers, and this isn't really doing much for us, so we're kind of losing our ability to do anything with these rules. But let's say I want to highlight all of these James entries. I'm going to go to color scheme. Now I'm going to go to more rules, and from here I'm going to select format only cells that contain. Alright, and now I want to do not cell value but specific text. I'm going to do text containing James, and I'll click the format button. Under color, where it has automatic, I'll click that. I want to highlight yellow, and I'll click OK. I'll click OK again and get this applied, and you can see here James is yellow, James is yellow. So if I want to do, let's go with Mike, and I want to go back into here. I'm going to change it a little bit different this time. Let's see, specific text containing Mike, and I want to, how about if we just bold Mike? Well, let's bold Mike and turn him red. Click OK, and Mike is bold and Mike is red. Now this also will come in useful for, let's see, this kind of scenario. Let's say we have a listing of cities. There's criteria that you can be over 100K population. Then there's another over 500K, and we might have city 1, city 2, and city 3. And then these are just going to be something like no, yes, yes, no, and yes, yes. So does that make sense? We can have a city like that. This would actually be yes, yes. Maybe that wasn't. Let's just change this so that we have less than 100K. And this right here probably will need to be a no, so that they're exclusive. Now if I highlight these and I want to turn all my no's red, we'll go back to our color scale and just go through the same kind of technique. Specific text containing, I'm going to do that format, and then I'm going to do red. Click OK, click OK. Now all the no's are red. But what if we had a mishmash of characters? So there wasn't all no. Maybe they were like this, and maybe even this was capitalized. So there's some variation going on. This was just an N. Okay, so we know this is a no, we know this is a no, but they're not being highlighted like this one is, and we want them to be red as well. So let's go back into our conditional formatting, color scale, more rules, and we're going to go back to format only cells that contain specific text containing just this letter, and color code them. And now we fixed that problem by just narrowing down the kind of letter that we have. And this is also useful if we have, let's see, a scenario where say some of these are missing. Alright, now let's highlight this here. We've got two that are missing. We want to highlight those that have nothing in them. So here we have two cells that are blank. Now if we go into our conditional formatting, back to color schemes, more rules, format only cells that contain blanks. And here's no blanks as well. So let's go with blanks. Now we'll go to format and select the color. Let's say we want red. I'll click OK, and nothing happens. Well, that makes sense because what we selected was to format text, and obviously these are blank, there's no text. So let's go back in, try that again a little differently. So we're going to do format only cells that contain blanks. Go back into our format. You can see here we're on font, so this is looking for some text. What we want is fill. We want to say yellow. We could have also done border, but we're going to go ahead and do fill. This is going to fill the cell. So we'll click OK, and we'll click OK again, and now we have our yellow and our blank cells. So conditional formatting, extremely useful for a lot of these kinds of scenarios to highlight specific types of text. I'd like to show you an interesting feature of Excel that allows it to figure out what kind of data you're typing into a cell. So let's say I've got header columns, and I've got first name. Let's just capitalize the F here. And then I've got over here date of birth, salary, and department number. Okay, so there's a variety of data types that I can use, and I'm going to do a John. We'll do 1/1/1960. That's not correct. 1960. Salary, we'll do 50,000. Department number, we'll do something like that. Okay, and I'm going to stretch this a little bit. Now if I look at these and I try to figure out the data format that Excel is using, and I look at the number up here, it just says general. If I right click and go to format cells, it's still general, although I know it's text. And if I go to salary, go to format cells, it's implying a currency there. If I look at date of birth, it's implying a date of birth. And if I look at this number, well, it's a general. So there, the date looks like it's formatted as date, and that's correct. And the salary, and we can see the currency, and we can see this is currency up here. But this number is general, and this text is general. So what is an Excel implying about these, though? Is there some way to tell as we're typing this in? We can by looking at the alignment of this value. So if you look at the alignment of the name John, it's aligned to left. And if you look at the alignment of this number 344, it's aligned right. To Excel, when it tries to imply text, it aligns it left. And when it tries to apply some kind of numeric value, something that it can do a calculation on, it'll try to align it right. So Excel is correct in its implication here and what it's implying. So this is a number, and it's saying I'm going to align this right to show it's a number. And then this is text, so it's going to put it left. So how does that help you? Well, if you have a lot of data and you're typing in a lot of data, or maybe you import a lot of data from a file, and you want to know if you can perform calculations off of it, or if you need to go and then first reformat that data into a particular type. Before you do any kind of reformatting work, you can just look at the alignment of the cell, and if it's right aligned, then you can do some kind of numeric calculation. If it's not right aligned, if it's left aligned, you know it's text, then maybe that's going to be a limitation. So this just helps you to figure out what is Excel thinking, and then you can decide how you want to move forward with the data formatting from that point. You might need to format it into a particular type, or if it's because of the alignment, maybe it's right aligned and you needed a number, then you're okay. You can go ahead and start working with that data. Let's say you have some data that you want to create a chart from. So for example, if I want to do salary, I would highlight the salary cells, go to the Insert tab, and I'm going to choose a pie chart. So I'll just click and select the 2D pie chart. So now I have this chart, and I might want to change the styling a little bit. So I'll click the Chart Styles button and select this one, which is nice because now it shows me a breakdown of the different contributions of salary to the total. So for example, the total of all of these salaries is $225,000, and I can see here this 10,000 is 4%, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense because in my legend there's no names. There's just 1, 2, and 3, and 4. And so I would want to change this to reflect the names, and instead of chart title, maybe it would say salary. So I'll know all of these percentages are reflecting the salary of each person. So that's the goal. How do we change this so that the chart makes more sense? If I click the chart and then I go down to chart filters, from here I can select data. Now you can see what the chart is made up of right now. So what I want to do is click Edit on Series 1. This is where we're going to change the title. And for Chart Series Name, I'm just going to select Salary. So that's going to be our title. And then for the series values, those are fine. Those are the actual salary values. So I'll leave that as is. And now I'll click over here to this second section, which is horizontal axis labels, and I'll click Edit. And from here, what I want to do is select my names. And if I select all these names here, click OK, and now I can click OK again, and you'll see all of our names are in here. And we also have salary here. So now visually we can tell what's going on, whereas earlier it just had like a series 1 and then it had 1, 2, 3, 4. So once you've made those changes, you can tell that they are correct just by looking at what is reflected in here. And any other changes you make will be reflected in these boxes as well. So you can tell as you're making those changes, is this really what I want? and it also helps you decide what cells you might want to click on and get the values from them, and then they'll be reflected here so you'll know you're doing it right. If I click OK, then we're finished and we have the data that we want. And so this makes a lot more sense. Now we can see that it's Jack who has the 4% contribution, and the largest contribution, the gray area here, is for Sam. And of course, if you hover over a pie slice in this chart, it gives you a lot of data there. So you can see salary, you can see their name. And also, the only header column we selected when we were updating was that salary column. So if I go back and look at what we did, this legend entries, if I edit that, right here, series name, I just click salary. And if I want to change that to name, it's not really going to have an effect on our data because it's just a name column. It's the series values that are important. So those are going to stay salary because they're B2 to B5. So those are our salary values. And so now when I click OK, you can see here it's not changing our chart, just changing the name up here. And then you can, of course, click into this and give it whatever you want. So now it's not reflective of a cell value, it's just my custom value. And if I go back into the filter and select data, you can see here it's still name, but we've kind of overridden that value with our own chart value. So that's how you can update a chart to reflect the data you want after the chart is already there. So it's a modification of an existing chart. We're going to look at a feature specific to Excel 2013. And I'm going to go ahead and start off with some data here. I'll just go ahead and create this pattern. And now if I want to, let's say I want to see the sum, we know we can go up to auto sum, for example, do a sum, and there's our sum. And that puts that into a cell. But what if we just want to look and get some data off of this? So maybe the sum, the average, without having to actually put that value into a cell. What I can do is make use of an Excel feature called Quick Analysis. You see this little box right here down in the bottom right. If I click it, there's a lot of options that come out here. So let's go through and look at what is happening with these. So I can do greater than, and right now it's just choosing some arbitrary number. But if I click, it's showing me what number are greater than, and I can say, well, what about 8? And I can just take a look at that and see what that looks like without having to actually implement or go up into the toolbar here. So if we look at a few more of these, let's go to totals, and now I want to do sum, and there's my sum, 55. What about average? So I've got the average. What about the count? So you can see we can just keep going through all of these, and we can do things like tables. There's pivot tables, and we can do different kinds of formatting. So we have our color schemes here, our icon sets. It's just a really quick way to see what some of these effects might have on your data. If I go to charts, this is also very nice. There's our chart. Maybe do scatter, you can do pie. There's a lot of different things you can do here. There's more charts you can make use of as well. You can see the different ones that we just tried out, and then there's charts over here that you can go through. And this is also using the data from this column right here. And we have like the area chart. Let's see, we've got surface charts, combo. So there's a lot of different kinds of charts here that you can make use of. So that's quick analysis. If you want to ever use this, just it should appear at the bottom right, and you click it, and there it is, and it's got a keyboard shortcut as well. So if I want to just do these right here, you can see I'm getting a quick analysis just for those. There's the keyboard shortcut, Control Q. And if I go to totals and I look at just this, you can see even with data under what I've highlighted, it writes over the cell under the main data, and I can see then the values. So that's quick analysis. Very useful, quick tool to help increase your productivity because it keeps you from having to go up to the menu bar and go through here, and it's just right there for you real quick. I have 4 spreadsheets in this book. So I've got down here at the bottom, you can see sheet 1, 2, 3, and 4. And something a lot of people do when they want to see all their spreadsheets, which can be useful if you want to link data in this cell to data in this cell, for example, is they'll split their view. So if I go up here, I'm in the View tab, and I click Split, it does something like this, and so you don't really get what you're after. Because what you want is really to take all 4 of these and have, let's say in the top left you've got a sheet, then in the bottom left there's another square, so you end up with 4 squares. Each square has a different sheet in it. That's the view you're really after in this scenario. There's a way to do that, and you can, again, in the View tab, you click New Window for however many sheets you have. So I'll just click again. Now I've got 2. I'll go back, I'll click, now I've got 3, so I've got 3 windows. If I go down here to my taskbar, you can see I've got 3, so I'll go back to View, I'll click once more, New Window. Now I've got 4, and if I go down here, you can see the 4 are there. Alright, so if I want to view all 4 of them, I'll go to Arrange All, and I'll do Tiled. And you can see I don't have anything else checked here. I'm just doing Tiled, and I click OK. And this is my view of all 4 of these windows. Now this is the same book. This is not a different book. You can see in the title, Book 1, this has a 4 next to it, and this is Book 1, it has a 3 next to it, but they're all Book 1. They're not different. So I'll click on Sheet 2 here. This is a different sheet. I'll click on Sheet 3. This is a different sheet. I'll click on Sheet 4. So now I've got all of my sheets visible, and they're all coming out of the same book. So to demonstrate that, let's say I want Steve Williams to be Steve Smith, and I just changed that in Sheet 2. If I go to Sheet 2 down here in this view, click on that, you can see it's also Smith because it's the same cell. And let's say that over here I've got these numbers. Okay, well in cell 10, A10, I'm going to add this 55, and then I'll add this 5, and I'll get 60. So I've got 60. This is on Sheet 3. So if I go up here to this top left window and I click Sheet 3, and I scroll down so I can see cell 10, there's my 60. So this is all the same book, and if I start closing these, so I'll just go ahead and go back to the single view and I'll close them all out. You see there's nothing to save because they're all the same one. And now look at my title up here, Book 1 doesn't have the :4 anymore because it's just the same window, and I'll maximize that so that I can see it. And if I click back, you can see I still have Smith, and here I've still got my 60. So everything is the same as what it was earlier. So that's how you can view multiple sheets in one single view. And if I look down here at my icon, I just have the one window now. I don't have the 4. So just a quick tip to help you, especially if you're needing to link from one sheet to another in the same book. This is going to save you a lot of time, and also if you just need, for whatever reason, to view multiple sheets out of the same book, this works really well for that situation too. We're going to see how to freeze certain columns and rows whenever we're working with a big spreadsheet. That's where it comes in really useful. So for example, let's say I wanted to freeze this first row, which would then allow me to scroll and have that first row always visible. Or maybe I want to freeze this first column so that when I scroll horizontally, that first column is always visible. There's a very easy way to do both of those. If you go to the View tab, you click on, say for example, Freeze First Column, and now that column over there is always visible. So you can see I scroll horizontally and the column is always there. Or I can unfreeze and then go to Freeze Top Row, And now if I scroll up and down, my header column is always visible. And I don't need to select anything. I can just go to freeze panes and then select top row or first column. So I'm going to go ahead and unfreeze this. Now let's say we want to freeze two columns. We want these two to always be visible. The way that works is to click a cell on the top row that is the right of the columns you want frozen. So right now I'm in C1, I'm on the top row, which says I'm going to freeze some columns, and it's going to be the first two, A and B. Now if I was over here in D1, that means I'm going to freeze columns, and they're going to be A, B, and C. Now I'm going to click back over here, and anything to the left of my selected cell will get frozen. For this, I'm just going to click freeze panes, and you can see here I get this line going through as well. Now whenever I scroll, I've got two columns that are always visible. So if I unfreeze this, let's see what happens if I click not on the first row but out here in the middle somewhere. I know that to the left these are going to be frozen over here, A and B, these columns. Now the same is going to hold true for anything above. So the way it works is anything to the left and anything above gets frozen. Let's see how that works in this case. So if I freeze panes, notice I have the gray bar here that we saw earlier, the gray line, and I've got another up here. So here's how that works. Those two columns are frozen, and then all those columns, all those rows at the top are frozen as well down to the fifth row. So you can see here they're always going to be visible down to the fifth row. And then I can click unfreeze. So the reason we froze only columns the first time is because we were up here. And the same rules apply. Anything to the left will be frozen and anything above. But there's nothing above, so that's why we only saw the freezing of these columns and nothing on the rows. So now let's say I want to freeze the first two rows, only the first two rows, no columns. I'll click here and then I'll select freeze panes. And so when I scroll up and down, the first two rows are visible, and then there's no effect on the columns. Whoops. You can see here I can scroll the columns and they're going to scroll anyway because none of them are frozen. And so it's the same rule. Anything to the left freezes, there's nothing to the left, which means there's no columns that are going to freeze, and anything to the top is going to freeze. And there's two rows above my selected cell, so those two rows are going to freeze and they're always going to be visible. So that's how freeze panes work. Whenever you're selecting somewhere out in your spreadsheet data and you click freeze panes, just remember that to the left and above your cell is what will freeze, and then top row and first column are fairly explanatory. You don't need to select anything and it's going to freeze the top row or it's going to freeze the first column. We're going to look at a few ways to select data, and here if I want to select all the cells that have data in them, I can click on the first one and drag and do something like this, and then that's selected, and I can right click and copy or do Control-C. That's now copied, and if I wanted I could paste this into a new sheet like that, and that's what I have. Now if I want to use just the keyboard, for example, I can click on one of these and then do Control, Shift, and 8, and that's going to select the areas that are adjacent with data, and of course it's going to select all the empty cells because they're within that range that we have data. So our data is a little bit odd because it creates these empty cells, so those will get selected as well. We end up like this with Control Shift 8. Now let's say we had something down here and we want to use that same technique. So I'll click any of the data, any of the cells with data, and I'll do Control Shift 8, and you can see here it's not going to select test 1 because it isn't adjacent to these other cells with data. It's just selecting the cells that are adjacent and have data. We have this space here, so that's why it's never selected. So if I do another test 1 and I click any of these cells, well, let's say I click this empty cell first and click Control Shift 8, notice how it's in the range, so it's going to select all of these. And then if I click one of these other cells with data, Control Shift 8, that also selects everything. So this test 1 now, because it's adjacent with this test 1, it creates this block of data. So there's always going to be this square that gets created whenever you're doing Control Shift 8 to select all the data that has, all the cells that have any kind of data. So if I were out here, I did Control Shift 8, notice nothing's happening. And if I go here, Control Shift 8, then I'm getting next to this cell that has data, so it's selected, and that's why that happens. And if I click again, Control Shift 8, it starts moving out the empty cells. So let me just show that again. I got this cell here that's empty and it's adjacent to a data cell. I do Control Shift 8. Now I have this. Now I want to get rid of the empty cells. I click it again. I click the 8, just the 8, and that removes some of the empty cells. So that's one way that you can select all the different areas that have any kind of data in them. So if this were, for example, much bigger, maybe it was something like this, and we have data all over the place. And notice this and this is adjacent, so those should all get selected. Everything should get selected. So we should see this very big block. If I do Control Shift 8, now everything is selected because everything's adjacent. And you'll notice that formatting was coming from these cells up here where it was turning the text different colors. So that is how you can do all of this. And if you want, select all of this here. And if you want to remove, you can see I still have this selection outline over here. You can just hit Escape to make that go away. So if I were selecting all of this and do Control C to copy, it leaves that outline. Just click Escape and that outline goes away. There are going to be times when you're creating a formula that you're going to want to lock certain cells and have them apply to each row that you're computing against. So for example, if I want to sum this first row, then do another sum that adds one of these rows, and then just keep doing it for each one and put the result in each cell next to these rows, I'll need to lock this first row. So here's what I mean. I'm going to do a sum and I'm going to add all of these. I'll do another sum and I'm going to add all of these. Alright, so there's my formula. Now if I want to apply this to these other two rows, so if I just drag this down, I'm not getting the result I want. Here's what's happening. These rows are shifting down, so this is actually summing an empty row. Then this one down here shifts down and it sums the first row right here rather than row 1. And that's not what we want. So to get around this, what you do is you can add dollar signs like this, and that makes these cells constant or locks them. Now if I drag this down, you can see here I get the correct computation. If we click on these and look at them, we can see the first row is applied to our row 4 down here, or actually it's the fourth row in the sheet, but it's the second row that we're computing against. Then the first row again is applied to our third row of data. Now there's a keyboard shortcut to accomplish all of this, so I'm just going to clear these out and we'll see how to do that. So let me just start over here and rebuild our formula, and I'm going to sum these, and now I want to lock. So what I'm going to do is function F4, and you can see here it automatically puts in all of our locking, and that is very fast. That's a lot quicker than having to type each of those and clicking your cursor into there and making sure you get it right. And if you mess up, then Excel throws about 2 pop-ups in your way and it just slows you down. So you know, we're all about speed, and this is how you get it when you want to lock cells. Now watch, if I drag this down, we get our correct computations. So if I highlight that one, that's acting on the first row, that's acting on the first row. and that's how you lock cells. Now there's another very useful keyboard shortcut. That's to reveal your formulas, which is if you have a complicated spreadsheet with formulas everywhere, and sometimes you just need to view those, and maybe you even need to print them out. There's a quick way to do that. You hold down the control key and click the tilde key. What you're actually after is an accent key. So if I do that now, this is what happens. You can see I get my formulas. And let's look at what key this actually is. So if I bring up my browser, here's a keyboard. It's this key over here by the 1 and the tab. You can see the tilde is at the top part of that key. Here's the accent, and that's what you're after. So if you hit Control, hold down Control, and you hit this key up here, your formulas will display, and then you lift Control. Then you just do the same thing and it toggles it back. You can also do this by clicking on the Formulas tab and go to Show Formulas, and there's your formulas revealed. And if I click right here between these two cells, it'll widen it automatically and I can see everything. Then I just click that back. So it's the same difference, but clicking Control and then tilde, but really the accent key will toggle every formula on your page or your sheet. I'd like to show you how to easily create an organizational chart. In Excel, I'm on the Insert tab, and I'm going to click Smart Art. And in here, I'll go to Hierarchy, and you can see the different kinds of charts that we have. So these are, right here, these top ones are great for organizational charts. I'll just click on the first one and click OK. And this is what it looks like, and if I click it, I can start typing in. Now sometimes, depending on the kind of chart you choose, you might get a box over here on the left. So let's see, I can change this chart right now. You can put pictures, you can put captions down here below that, you can do different kinds of styling. So I can do something like this where I've got a little bit of shadow. So I'll go ahead and start typing some stuff into this. Let me go back to what we had earlier, right there. And you can see our shadow is still there. So I'll do CEO, I'll do CIO, I can do VP of Marketing. Now watch when I type this longer word, what happens. So I'll do VP Marketing. You can see everything else resizes, so that makes that very nice. I can do COO, for example, and let's see, I can do VP of HR, and there's my organizational chart. And there's a lot of these, as you can see, that we can do. We can do different kinds of things to them. But what if you want to take this and put it now inside of PowerPoint and use it there? Okay, well, I'll click on this bar right here and I'll select copy. Now I'm just going to go ahead and start PowerPoint. And I'll bring up PowerPoint. And I'll just create a new document. There it is. Now what I want to do is paste in my chart. So I'll click here, paste, and there's a few options here. I can use destination theme, which is going to try and match whatever theme I have in PowerPoint. I can keep the formatting, and that's the one we're going to go ahead and use, or I can just do it as a picture. So if I keep the formatting and we look at this, so here's my organizational chart, and I can take it and move it around. I can change some of this, so maybe I want the CIO, or I'm sorry, the Chief Marketing Officer, so I can change that up. Let's say though I don't want it editable, so I'm going to delete this and then I'm going to go back to paste and I'll just do as a picture. So all the integrity is going to be held here, meaning none of this can be changed. It's all going to stay exactly as it is. And if I hold down the shift key and I drag, it's going to keep the ratio of this, and I can resize it to whatever I want, and I can move it around, of course. So that's how you create an organizational chart, and also how you can put it into PowerPoint if you want to use it inside of a presentation. Creating a database in Excel might sound like a surprising thing to do, but we're going to see exactly how to do that. What I'm going to do is start off with a few header rows. And this is going to be something like an analytics, website analytics that you might use to check for page views. So I'm going to do a date. I'll do page views, clicks, and one more, page CTR. And I just want to capitalize clicks. And then I'm going to do 1/1/2014. I can do 2/5/2014, 3/5/2014, 4/20/2014. Okay. And let's put in some data. So 55, 73, 104, and 65. And put in a few clicks, 3, 7, 7, 3. So this is maybe something that would be used for tracking conversions. And here we would get our conversion rate. These are going to be in percentages. And I'm going to go ahead and declare this as a percentage. And add a little bit more data here. So we have like a 9.59. And 4.62. Now what I want is to make this our table basically, and every time I can add new rows here just by tabbing out of this cell, and it'll create a new row, and that row will then be linked into this table. So very similar to what you might see in Microsoft Access and other similar kinds of databases. To do this is very easy. Just highlight the data that you want to add into a table. Then go to Insert, and from here you'll want to click Table. And then it's going to ask for the range of the cells, and click OK. And there you have it. And from here you get these drop downs, which you can do sorting by. You can sort by color. You can do searches. So for example, if I want to sort all of these, I can go smallest to largest, and those are resorted. And if I want to find 73, there's a search field. I can say 73, click OK, and there we go. And then of course I can go back into here and select all just by clicking right there. Click OK. You can also, if I go back and we do 73, I click OK. I can go back into this filter and do clear filter from page views, and they all come back. So you have that ability. That's like a where clause if you're familiar with SQL syntax, where you might say select star from table name where page views equals 73. That's what that search looks like. And then you have the sorting that we just looked at. As well, you can create charts from this data. So I might highlight this and highlight this over here. Let's see, I just want to highlight this last bit of data and go to our charts. So go to Insert, can do this pie chart. And I'm going to change the style a little bit here to this one. It's a nice looking chart. And I'm going to change our 1, 2, 3, 4 over here because it's not very descriptive. So I'll click on our values and select data. Now what I want is edit the horizontal axis labels. And I'll choose these so that now our data is represented by date. And click OK. And we can see there that we have 1/1. Our first row is 21% because it's blue. And we get a hint there. We can see that as well. And if I change these, let's make this into 15. And 3/5 is the orange one down here. If I tab out, you can see that the 3/5 takes up quite a bit of space. We also get a new row, and this new row is starting to be accounted for in our chart as well. So I just tabbed off of this last row, and now I have this row. So for this row, I'm going to do 5, 20, 20, 14, and I can do, let's see, 95, can do 9, and then 9.47. And now that data is filling in on the chart. If I tab out again, it wants to start another row. And I'll just click away, and I can just delete that row like you would any row. And then my data is back to just the visible bit of data. So we have 5 rows. We have 5 elements here in our chart as well. And then our chart is reflecting accurately the data. So orange 3, 5, which is this row right here, still representative of the largest bit of data. And you hover over these, you get the hint, and you can see that 15% is, this 15% right here is actually 34% if you aggregate all of these. And that is a basic small database in Excel, and the ability to do searches and also sorting. And we can see as we update this thing, as we update this data, our chart is going to update. And when we want to create a new row, just click into the last cell, tab out, and you're already starting a new row. And if you don't want that new row, just highlight that row, then right click and delete. And that will delete that row. That will delete that data out of this chart as well. There might be scenarios in which you would like to hide all of these empty cells out here so that you have a really focused spreadsheet in which just the data you're working with is what's visible. So to do something like that, to hide all these other columns, I'll click on the start column, which is D. So I'll click on the header column for D. Now to select all these columns to the right, you could just scroll through across all the way, but then you'll probably be scrolling until Excel 2020 comes out. But we're all about productivity, and here's how you would do it a much quicker way. So click on your column, hit them, and that highlights this column. Now you want to click Shift, then N, and then your right arrow. And what that's going to do is highlight all of these columns. Now you want to right click on a header and select Hide. You can also do this if you click on your Home tab and then under Cells, click Format, go to Hide and Unhide, and Hide Columns. And there you go, they are gone. Now to do it for the rows, so I want to start here and hide all these down here. It's very similar. So you'll click Shift, End, but this time you'll click the down arrow, and that's going to do this. Now instead of clicking or right clicking on a column header, you actually want to click on row headers, and then I can just click Hide, and they're gone. So now the question is, well, how do I get them back? So if I click on a column header, right click, and I say unhide, nothing happens. So what you need to do in this case is actually click and drag out to where the empty cells are, and now if you right click, you can do unhide, and they come back. And you could have also done the same thing through the format, hide and unhide, and then unhide columns, and unhide rows there as well. And I'll show you why you actually had to drag over to get them to display. So let's say we want to hide this column B, and this is easy enough because all we need to do is right click, hide. So now we just have A and C. And if you look right here in between these two, it's a little bit wider right there. That's referred to as a gutter. It's created this kind of a small gap in between these two. So if I want to bring that column back, I highlight each column on each side of where column B was, and I can click on either one of these and unhide, and column B comes back. So you notice I had to click on column A and column C, and that is similar to the scenario where we wanted to bring back all our other columns. We actually had to click C and drag out over onto one of those hidden columns. So that's how you can hide single column, or you can hide multiple columns or multiple rows. and also how to get them back. There are times when you might want to change the color of your sheets. The sheet tabs in particular down here at the bottom. And you can see I've got 3 of these. And this can be very useful, especially if you want to give your workbook to someone else and you want to sort of group some of these tabs together by particular kinds of colors, or if you just want them to better stand out in separation. That's what colors can help you do. To do that, to create a color on these tabs, right-click on a tab and select Tab Color. And when you hover over the colors, the tab is going to change to the color you're hovering over. So I'll select this green. And this is kind of a darkish green, and you'll notice it's still light. It's a light green rather than the dark I just selected. And that's because I'm actually on the tab. The tab is highlighted. Now if I click on Sheet 2, watch what happens to the color of the Sheet 3 tab. You can see here, now the color I've chosen is selected. So if I add another tab color to this sheet, and I'll just do kind of a reddish color. So the reddish is still there, but it's light so that the text is clearly visible. And when I click away, now the red is there. And all these are still clear and readable because Excel does a really good job of making sure the text is readable. And so when I go back to Sheet 3, you can see here it's lighter. And I click off and go to Sheet 2. Sheet 3 is going to go dark, and then Sheet 2 comes in lighter. So it's still very readable, and Excel does a good job of handling all that. And you have colors, and you can, as these tabs grow, you might just want to do similar colors for similar groups, and that will help other people understand what's happening there. Now Excel has some templates that provide some pretty good examples of tabs. So if I select, let's say, diet and exercise, I've already downloaded this template, so let's just take a look at it here. I'll create. And you can see here the colors that they're using kind of match their theme. So if I click on diet, and you can see what's happening there. So that's a good example of how these tabs can interplay with your themes as well. And of course, if I want, these are already colored, I can just right-click and I can change them to whatever color I want. So I might want this red. If I click off of there, there's that red. So, and this right here is a good example of how they've gone about grouping the tab colors and making it associate to their theme. So that's just a quick way that you can change your tab colors and maybe group a bunch of tabs so that you've got groupings by color. We're going to see how to use Excel's Solver, which is an add-in for Excel. The first thing we need to do is add the solver. So I'm going to click File and then Options, and that will bring up this window. I'll click in Add-ins, then I'll click Solver Add-in down here. And now I'll click Go, and I'll click Solver Add-in, then I'll click OK. And under the Data tab, that adds the solver, which you can see here. This is the example that we're going to use, and I'm going to go through and explain what's happening here. Basically, we have 3 products, A, B, and C. These products require particular parts. Each one requires parts P1 through P4. And the products require a certain combination of each part. So for example, product A requires 2 part 1s, 1 part 2, 1 part 3, and 4 part 4s. And you can see for B, it has a particular combination of parts it requires, and then there's product C, which also requires a certain combination of parts. And right here is the profit we make on each product. So this is profit broken out by product. So if you sell one product A, it's a $10 profit, and one product B is a $25 profit, and so on to C, which is 50. And we have our quantities of each product. So 40 of product A, and we can change these quantities. So they're highlighted in yellow which means we can change them. And those are the only ones we can change. It's basically our dial to adjust what's going to happen here. So we have a limited inventory of each part, which we can see here. And then we have the ones we've used and then what's left over. Now let's look at the calculations of how this works. So there's no calculations in this area here. There is a calculation here, which you can see up here. So if I highlight the formula, you can see the cells that are getting worked on. For part 1, to figure out how much of the inventory we've used, basically you take the quantity of part A times the number of part 1s that it needs. So 40 times 2, and then you just keep working down each part, plus 10 times 4 plus 60 times 1. And that's going to give you how much of part 1 we need. And so for this particular quantity, this particular set of quantity for each product, this is the inventory we need, 180. This is another formula that's a simple subtraction of part 1 inventory minus what we require will give us our remaining. And so there's the calculations, and all these are calculated the same way, and all of these are calculated the same way. Down here we have profit based on how many products we sold. So this is profit per product based on the quantity sold. So 40 times 10 is 400, and that's how much we make for selling 40 part A's. $250 is what we'll make in profit for selling 10 part B's, so 10 times 25. And finally we have our part C, and 50 times 60 is 3,000. Then we add these up and we get 3650. Our goal here then is to figure out what is the best combination of quantity that will maximize our profit. This is what we're after, without giving us a negative number in our remaining. So let's see how this works real quick. If I try to do 50 of A, let's see what happens with our profit. So our profit goes up, and we're now out of part 2s, which means basically we can't do anything more with this. We've just maxed out. We could decrease this to 45, which would bring in some more part 2s, and that also decreased our profit. So here if I go with, say, 11 product B's, so our profit just increased a little. We have 2 more of these left, but we can already see if I go to 12, this requires 3. That's going to give us a negative number here because we only have 2. So if I go to 12, we end up with this negative number, which we don't want. So there's a better way to do this kind of problem solving, where we need to maximize this number right here, total profit, by changing these values. So you can see there's a number of combinations we can go through, changing the quantity of each product and kind of guessing at what would happen with our remaining quantity. So if something goes negative, then we back off and we adjust something else. But that's very time consuming. It's also not efficient, and we're all about productivity. So what we're going to do now is use the solver. I'm on my data tab and I'll click the solver, which brings up this window. The first thing I'm going to do is set the objective, which is going to be profit. We're after maximum profit. So I'll click here and then click our profit cell, and now I'll click back over here to show our window again. So this is the end result that we're after, the profit. And we're going to maximize profit, which is checked, so that's fine. That's good. And then we want to select the cells that we can actually change, which are the 3 in yellow. So I'm going to highlight those. I just drag across, and that sets up a range. And then I'll click again. And now we need to set some constraints, because we do have constraints. The constraints that we want to add are going to be, we'll start first with remaining. We can't have a negative number here because we have a finite amount of inventory. So we can't choose more than that. We can't, for example, choose more than 300 of part 1. We can't have 310, which would give us a -10 number. So what I'm going to do is add, and again I'm going to select the cell range, which is this one. I'll click that we want this to be greater than or equal to 0. Because a 0 number is fine. That just means we've completely depleted whatever the amount of inventory is for that part. And I'll click OK. So there we have a constraint on our inventory remaining. Now we need to set up a constraint for our quantity because we want it to be greater than or equal to 0 as well. We can't have a negative quantity of product A, for example, so we don't want negative numbers. So I'll click Add and select the range. Then I'll say again greater than 0 and click OK. Now we have everything set up for the solver. We've got our profit cell here, which is what we're after, and we want to maximize profit. Then the cells that can be changed we have here, which is our quantity, and we have two constraints. We have a constraint first on the inventory left over not being less than 0, which is the same as saying greater than or equal to 0. And we also have a constraint on our quantity not being less than 0. And again, the same as saying greater than or equal to 0. So I'm going to click Solve, and Solver has completed. And I'll say Keep the Solver Solution. And what I'm also going to do on this report is select Answer, just so we can take a look at that in a little bit. I'll click OK. And you can see what the solver came up with. It came up with 5,000 compared to what we had earlier, which was around 3,700, and doing a lot of back and forth trying combinations of quantity. The solver says just take 100 of product C and don't worry about products A and B. They're just not worth it. So now all we have to manufacture is product C. So if this was an analysis to figure out which products are viable out of the 3 before we ever set to manufacturing, or before maybe we ever set up our floor to manufacture anything, or which machines we'll need, right here we already know we're saving ourselves a ton of time because A and B don't even fit into the equation based on our initial analysis of what's required for A and B. So all of this production goes away and we focus on this production only. So that's how the solver can certainly help in figuring out these kinds of problems and how to solve them. And as long as you can set up your restrictions, your constraints, so that it doesn't do anything strange, and a lot of the times it's going to be not going below 0. Now we did tell it to generate an answer report, and it generates it into a tab. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this, and we can see here what we have. It shows our original value, which was 3,700, compared to the solver's maximum of 5,000. And then we can see our original values here as well, and then this is what we eventually come to with the solver. And these are mainly the two that you'll be most interested in, what you start off with and then what the solver eventually ends up with. So that's the solver and how to use it, and certainly helpful when you have something like this, that you've got a particular set of cells that you can change and they affect a few other areas of cells, just like we had here with remaining inventory and then profit. There was a lot of interlinking there between the formulas that were built up for this, and solver handled it just fine. Let's say you have the need for economic data such as GDP, labor information, different kinds of growth data for the US. You could go to different websites trying to find that data. Eventually you might find exactly what you're looking for. Then you would probably want particular date ranges, and that may get a little more complicated and time consuming to put the data into the format you're looking for, build a graph out of it, and also create the data range you're looking for. In this course, we're all about efficiency, so we're going to see a way to do this by getting data directly from the Federal Reserve. They actually provide a plugin or an add-on for Excel that allows us to pull their data directly into Excel, all kinds of data, and easily create graphs from it. And we're going to see how to do that next. And I'm at the website here. If you ever want to reach this and you don't have the URL, just type in Fred installation instructions into Google and you should get it on the first search result. And over here you'll just type in your email address and you can actually uncheck these options here if you don't want that. And then just click download and I'll go to my desktop and right here's the file, the XLAM file. And so this is the one that you'll add to Excel through your add-ins, which we'll see how to do in just a few seconds. And once you do that, just remember to restart Excel, and that's all there is to it. And you'll have a Fred tab that you can then begin using it. And you can see here the file is downloaded onto my desktop, and now I'll bring up Excel. And what I want to do is go ahead and open up a blank worksheet. And then I'll go to File, Options, and I'm going to go to Add-ins. Down here I'll click Go under Manage Excel Add-ins. And I'm going to now browse. I'm going to browse to my desktop. And I'll select the file. And you can see now we have that. And I'll click OK. And now I'm going to restart Excel. Now I'll go back into a blank worksheet. I'll click, normally these would be under the data where we could see an accumulation of some of these add-ins, but Fred actually has its own tab. So we can click here and here's all the different components for Fred. Now we're going to see what makes Fred such a great tool, especially when you need economic data directly from the source, the Fed, and when you need to manipulate it into specific date ranges as well. I'm going to start off by going to Browse Popular US Data. So I'll click this and go to Money, Banking, and Finance. I'll click the SP500. You can see this message I get, please activate cell in first row. So I need to click here. Now I'll go back and then I'll click SP500 and I'll click Get Fred Data. And that's going to pull in this data. Now this is nice, but let's say we want a graph of it. So I'll just click Build Graph, and there's our graph of the data. So you can see here the Great Recession happened right there, and then we're trending up, 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 and we're at new highs. Now what if you want this to restrict to, say, 2010, January 2010? You can see it starting at 2004. You might think, well, I need to change this here because this is where it's starting, but that's wouldn't be the right column. Actually, the column you want to change to restrict the beginning date is here. So what I'm going to do is follow their format, and I'll go with 2010-0101 and tab out. Now I'll click Update Data. And you can see we just pulled in all our new data starting in 2010. And so the first trading day was the 4th, and that was adjusted. Our graph was adjusted as well. And the nice thing about these graphs, you can see at the bottom, it's got the source. So that's really nice. You can take this graph and put it in a PowerPoint presentation or use it as an image, however you want to use it. And this is a really great graph to have. All right, now let's look at a few other things that we can adjust. Now let's try something different. And since I'm trying a completely different set of data, I'm going to click on a new sheet. I'm not going to try and manipulate that other sheet because that can cause problems and you start getting errors. So now I want to go to prices and I'm going to choose oil. So this is an interesting one. I'll pull in the data. And now we have our data. So this is going all the way back to 1986. I want to do just this year, in fact. So I'll do 2014 hyphen 01 hyphen 01, tab out. So always remember to tab out of your cell, update data, and build graph. And there's the oil prices. So really cool stuff. Now I'm going to do another sheet, and we're going to go purely for some economic data such as GDP. So I'll go to National Income and Expenditures, Real Gross Domestic Product. I'll get Fred data, and now I'm going to restrict this since, let's say right before the recession, so I'll do 2007 hyphen, whoops, I'm in the wrong cell here. I need to go up here to row 4. I'll do 2007 hyphen 01 hyphen 01 and tab out. And now I'll update this data. And then I'll build graph. And there's our real gross domestic product. So Fred, pretty interesting tool to get economic data directly from the Fed. So you know it's accurate. And you can build graphs very easily. These graphs update in real time when you update date ranges over here. And of course you have the source down here, so that if you want to use these graphs, they're source, and you can put them, you know, on your blog or other materials you might want to use, and have a valid reference to the Fed and accurate data. We're going to see how to install Excel's add-in called Power Query, which lets you extract data from multiple sources, including the web, very easily. And that's the main point. It's very easy to extract that data. And once you have that data, you can manipulate it. You can do searches on it. You can do all kinds of different things with it once it's in Excel. So this is a great tool for anyone that needs to extract and do transformations on data, meaning you need to manipulate that data once you have it. This being an add-in, we'll click File, and you need to have a document open to get to the options down here. So we'll click Options in the left side, and I'll click Add-ins. This is going to be a COM add-ins, and I'll click Go. Now you'll notice it's not even listed here. That's because you actually have to download it. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. And I'll switch over to Internet Explorer. I'll type in the search query, install Excel Power Query. And that's all you need to do. And this works for Excel 2013 and 2010. And then you can click on this first link. Just make sure it's office.microsoft.com. So you want a Microsoft.com domain there. I'll click on this link here. And then it says download and install. I'll click right here, Microsoft Power Query for Excel. And on this next page, I'll leave it as English and click download. So it's asking me, do you want 32-bit or 64-bit? This is related to the version of Excel you want to install, not your operating system. So if you have a 64-bit operating system, you probably still need to install 32-bit Excel. I'll click Next, Accept, Next. This is fine. And install. So we'll let this go ahead and download. So that is finished, and I'll click Finish here, and then I'll close Internet Explorer. Yes, close all tabs. And I'll restart Excel. Now when I go back into the options, it should be there. We'll see. And now I'm back in Excel. I'm going to go ahead and do blank worksheet. I'll click File. Now when I go to Options, I'm going to go to Add-ins. We have Power Query now. So you can see here it's a COM add-in, which is the one we selected earlier. So for this one, you'll, at least in 2013, Excel 2013, you'll need to go out and to Internet Explorer or whatever your web browser is and download it there. And then you can just install it. It's an MSI, so you'll need to double click and you can install it. And I'll click that and click OK. And we have the Power Query tab right there. So I'm going to look at a quick example of how to use this. And first I'll explain some things. We've got On this Power Query tab, all of our sources right here, so get external data, this whole section. Online search mainly will work with Wikipedia and from web. So sources from the internet, of course, and then from file. Well, this is from web, so you can see here it's asking me to type in a URL to a specific website. Then you can load from a file, and you can also from database. There's other sources here. There's quite a number of them. There's a lot of, so there's from SharePoint, so I'm just going to highlight a few that might be interesting to you. There's SharePoint, Active Directory, Microsoft Exchange, Facebook, then just a blank query. So we're going to do online search. I'll click that. Over here on the side is where I type in my query. So let's say I want largest cities in United States. And I'll hit enter. And that is searching the web. This is interesting, 1860. So I'll go ahead and click on this first one, but you can see here how we get this really nice looking preview of our data. Well, how about let's do current. I'm going to do 2010. I'll click that. Just double click that, and now it's loading that data. It's going to put it into a table. There we have it. And because this is basically a table, we can click on these and sort them. So you can see here I've got sorting options. I can search. So if this was much bigger, I could type in state and it would just display that particular state. So that is an extraction of data from Wikipedia. And just to show you the search, let's go with Texas. So if this was much bigger, it would look better. So I'm going to hit that and do enter, and there's all the ones for Texas. And I can say clear it. And I'm going to go back to Power Query. You can use the from web where you would enter a URL, but there's so much information already available from Wikipedia. So for example, if I want to do, let's see, S&P 500, just see what this brings. So the component stocks, recent change lists, total annual returns, history. Find one with a good amount of data. Let's just do the component stocks. So this is going to be a listing of all the different stocks in the index. So I'll double click that. Just wait for this data to load. And you can see here we get a different sheet. So we have over here our cities. Then over here we have this sheet with all of our stock listings. And from Wikipedia you can do things like zip codes. You can do cities in a state. You can do population information. There's just a ton of different things that you can do with the information available. And of course over here you can search. So if I want, say, AIG, I hit enter, and there's AIG, and then I can clear that out right there, clear filter, and everything is back. So this is really a great way to extract data from all kinds of sources, and it takes, so this order of data, for example, so if on a web page you see this data and you're wondering how am I ever going to get this data off this page, it just doesn't look orderly. That's what Excel Power Query is good at. It finds a pattern and a way to extract that data. Now probably there's a lot of sites that it won't be able to extract from, but you can use URL to a site and see if you're able to query anything off of that site. I believe you'll find that just using the online search is the best option, because unless you know that the particular site you want to do URL from is in such a format that Power Query is going to be able to work with it, then it's not going to be able to extract anything, and you'll end up just wasting a lot of time going that route. So the online search, at least for the web, if you don't really know what the website that you're maybe wanting to extract data from, if it's compatible with Power Query, I would just go with online search and stick with Wikipedia. And that would be the quickest way to get all kinds of data, and I'm sure you'll see that you'll be able to find pretty much anything that you'll want using just the online search via Wikipedia. If you're interested in more great business courses, similar to the one you've just taken, please check out my skill feed page. If you scroll down from any of my course pages to the About Instructor section, you can see my page here, bitesizebschool.com skill feed. And Bite Size Business School is my website. And if you go to that page, this is what it looks like. So here I've got a newsletter that you can subscribe to specific to my skill feed courses. And on here, weekly, I announce the courses that I've come out with and then courses that I've added new lectures to. So it's a great way to stay up to date on all of my courses. For business courses in particular, if you scroll through, you can see all the different sections of courses that I have. And go to the bottom, here's the business section, and you can see the different courses I've got. There's branding courses, there's some basic business courses about opening checking accounts, comparison of what front-end and back-end sales are. And this section will continue to grow as I add more courses to it. And as I add lectures, especially to this Excel course, as I add new lectures here, I'll announce it to my members on the newsletter. So I certainly encourage you to sign up for the newsletter. And this is just a great place to see all the courses I offer and to stay up to date with me. And thank you.